Hi there, YouTube. Today I'd like to share my story with you how my wife cheated on me with our neighbor, my friend. So my wife, we will call her Gabby, who's 26, cheated on me, a 27-year-old guy, with one of my friends. Let's call him Henry, who's also 27. Let's rewind a bit to give you some context. We first met when I was 22, at another friend's wedding. She was close friends with the bride, and I was a good friend of the groom. They strategically sat us at the same table, probably hoping we'd hit it off. The moment I laid eyes on her, I was blown away by her beauty. As she took her seat and we started talking, we quickly discovered we had a lot in common. We clicked immediately. We chatted for hours, enjoyed dinner together, and eventually hit the dance floor. We danced and drank the night away, and at one point, we shared a kiss right there in the middle of the dance floor. Our friends, the bride and groom, noticed and eagerly came over to ask what was going on between us. They were excited to play matchmaker, but we just shrugged it off and continued our night. We didn't exchange numbers that evening, but about a week later, she texted me out of the blue, asking me out. Turns out the bride had given her my number. Of course I said yes, and that's how our relationship began. Things were great between us. Sure, we had our minor arguments, but nothing serious. 2 years into our relationship, I proposed, and less than a year later, we were married. For a little over a year, things were good. Then, just before our first anniversary, everything started to fall apart. I began to notice little things that bothered me. She became more secretive with her phone, her girls' nights out became more frequent, and our sex life nearly disappeared. I brought up my concerns multiple times, but she always brushed me off, telling me I was just being insecure. She acted like my feelings didn't matter at all. Feeling increasingly cold and distant, I stopped giving her a goodbye kiss when I left for work, and we barely spoke unless it was something important. One night, while she was asleep, I took her phone and laptop and went through her texts, emails, and messenger apps, but found nothing suspicious. Remembering stories I had read online, I decided to check her car. I found a second phone hidden there. Instantly, I knew what was happening, but I needed solid proof before confronting her. I went through the phone and found only one number saved. I read every message and printed out every text and photo, spending the night researching divorce lawyers. The next day, I spent hours in my home office, reading lawyer bios, and found one I liked. I emailed him, but since it was a Saturday, he wasn't in the office. I was desperate to know who the guy was, so I grabbed my phone and started typing the number, intending to pretend to be from Spectrum, because who doesn't have Spectrum, right? To my shock, Henry's contact popped up. It took me a moment to connect the dots, but when I did, I exploded in rage. I was yelling and cursing in my office, and my wife opened the door to check on me. The moment I saw her, I shouted at her to get the hell out. She quietly closed the door and went to our bedroom. I had never cursed at her or raised my voice before. That whole day, I stayed in my office silently seething. Later, I called one of my friends from the wedding and told him I needed to go for a drink, asking if he'd come with me. He must have sensed something was wrong because he asked if I was okay. I told him I wasn't, and that I really needed a drink. Without another word, I grabbed all the printouts and headed to the bar. I got there first and ordered 4 shots of Jack and a beer. By the time my friend Jason arrived, I was on my last shot. He asked what was going on, and I told him straight out that Gabby was cheating on me. When I revealed it was with Henry, he got visibly upset, since he was the one who had introduced me to Henry. All he could do was apologize repeatedly. Henry and I were never that close. We didn't hang out much, but we were friendly at get-togethers. I asked Jason not to mention this to anyone, since I had just found out and hadn't even spoken to a lawyer yet. I also asked him not to tell his wife, and to just say I was having work issues if she asked about me. He agreed, and we spent the night drinking and talking. Around 3 a.m., I called an Uber and headed home. It was the first time I checked my phone since calling Jason, and I saw a bunch of missed calls and texts from Gabby, asking where I was, when I'd be home, and if I was okay. When I got home, I found her asleep on the couch. I just walked up to our bedroom and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up to find her in bed beside me. I dressed quickly and left the house, picked up my car, and headed to my office, burying myself in work for the day. I returned home around 10 p.m., and to my surprise, she was there waiting for me. She had made dinner and asked if I wanted it heated up. I told her no and went straight to bed. She soon followed, pestering me about what was wrong. I snapped, yelling at her to leave me alone because I wanted to sleep. The next morning, I received an email from the lawyer asking to meet later that day. I confirmed the appointment and got ready for my day. As I was leaving, she had made breakfast and wanted to talk. I made a small plate and sat down. She started going on about how I had changed and wanted to know why. I told her work had been stressful and that it would soon be over. I finished eating and left for my office, counting down the minutes until I could meet the lawyer. When I left, I told my assistant I was going out to lunch with a client, knowing my wife sometimes called my work. The meeting with the lawyer went well. I handed over all the evidence I had gathered, and the lawyer expressed sympathy for my situation, but was glad I had collected everything. He explained that since we live in an at-fault state, my wife had no claim to most of my money. I hadn't even thought about that. I was just focused on divorcing her as soon as possible. He agreed to keep the evidence but would make copies, since I hadn't confronted my wife yet and didn't want her making excuses. He told me she would be served with papers in about 2 weeks. I thanked him and left. When I got home, she wasn't there. I called her, but there was no answer. I texted, "I don't care if you're with Henry right now. Get home. We need to talk." She called back almost immediately, asking what I was talking about. I just told her to come home now. She arrived about 15 minutes later, and I said, "Wow, 15 minutes. That's about the distance between here and Henry's, isn't it?" She looked shocked. I gave her a moment to gather herself, but she just stood there, speechless. I continued, "Nothing to say?" She tried to deny it and gaslight me, working herself up and starting to insult me. I slammed my fist on the table to shut her up and pulled out the evidence. I showed her the mountain of proof I had collected. She started to cry and apologize, saying she loved me. I responded, "What happened to that energy you had earlier, insulting me? Now you're sorry." She tried to hug me, but I pushed her away and said, "Don't touch me." She suggested we go to the bedroom and do whatever I wanted. I looked her in the eyes and said, "I will never touch you again." "Do you know who else has these photos and messages?" "My lawyer. I'm divorcing you. Now get a bag, gather your clothes, and get out of my house." That was 3 days ago, and I haven't heard from her since. Since then, I've been taking steps to protect myself. I've removed her from all our financial accounts and changed passwords on everything. Getting a sexually transmitted disease test was also on my list, and it's crucial to avoid acting out of anger, no matter how much I feel like confronting her or Henry. Following my lawyer's advice, I'm looking into changing the locks on the house, since she's effectively abandoned the marital home. I'm steering clear of alcohol and drugs, knowing I need to keep a clear head for what's coming next. I'm bracing myself for the inevitable, her begging, gaslighting, and shifting the blame. She might even try to paint me as the villain to justify her betrayal, so I'm making sure to tell everyone what she's done and why I'm divorcing her. That includes parents, friends, and especially Henry's girlfriend. I've been channeling my anger and frustration into exercise, which helps calm me down and tire me out, making it a bit easier to sleep as the reality of the situation sinks in. As I said, I'll stick to what my lawyer advised. All communication between my wife and me should go through him, so hopefully, I won't have to talk to her at all. Henry does have a fiancée, and I plan to tell her everything. Someone asked how I plan to contact Henry's fiancée, considering Henry likely knows I'm aware of the affair and might be monitoring any mail or visits to their house. Hopefully, he doesn't have access to her email or social media. I've met her a few times and have her number, so I'll keep trying to call until she answers. If she doesn't respond, I'll go to their house when Henry is at work and leave a note on her car, telling her to contact me. There's no way I'm letting that piece of scum get away scot-free. Honestly, the emotions I felt in those moments were overwhelming. It's tough to look someone in the eye or even be near someone who betrayed you, especially with a friend. Thankfully, I had someone to talk to, and having a supportive community really makes a difference. Despite everything, I think I've handled myself with grace and made the right moves. At this point, I'm just following my lawyer's lead. I focused on damage control. I scheduled an appointment with my doctor to get checked for sexually transmitted diseases, which is in 2 days. Next, I started contacting people close to me. My father and a few friends were very supportive, offering advice and help, but I assured them I had things under control. Then, I reached out to her family. I texted her parents, thanking them for welcoming me into their family and expressing gratitude for all they had done. I told them that Gabby and I are getting divorced and that I would miss them. In reality, they were quite suffocating, and while they are good people, I'm relieved I won't have to deal with them anymore. I also told them to feel free to ask any questions. I didn't hear back from them immediately, so I moved on to Gabby's sister. This one stung because we were good friends, and I knew this would affect our relationship. I texted her, explaining that Gabby and I are divorcing and thanking her for accepting me as a brother from day one. I told her I'd still be around if she needed anything. Shortly after sending that text, her parents responded. Their response went like this: "We're so sorry to hear this. What happened? Why hasn't Gabby said anything to us?" Me. Gabby has been in at least a year-long affair. I suspect it started before our wedding. I'm unsure why she hasn't reached out, but I think you should call her. She left the house. I figured she would have gone to you. Parents. No, we haven't heard from her. We'll call her. Thanks for letting us know. Are you sure she was having an affair? Me. I am positive. I found their texts. Parents. We're so sorry that she did that. We'll try and get in touch with her. After dealing with her family, I contacted Henry's fiancée. I can't recall if I mentioned he was engaged in the first part, but it came up in the comments. I thought this would be challenging, thinking Gabby and Henry might have planned something, but either she didn't tell him I found out, or they're just idiots. I texted her around 2 p.m., asking if we could meet for coffee. By 2:05, she agreed and suggested a hipster coffee shop near her work at 2:30. I arrived first, ordered my awful coffee, and waited. She walked in, got her drink, and joined me. I told her there was no easy way to say this, so I just blurted it out. Henry has been cheating on you with my wife. It's been going on for more than a year. She was obviously shocked, so I explained that I had only found out a few days ago. I admitted that I should have told her immediately, but I had to start my divorce and deal with my own emotions. She asked how I discovered the affair, and I told her everything I had posted earlier. Then I offered to show her the evidence I had gathered and pulled out a binder. She took it and skimmed through the messages and pictures, starting to cry silently. I told her she was welcome to keep the binder and could use the copies to confront Henry or see if he would lie about it. She thanked me, stood up, and left looking very defeated, carrying the binder with her. I told her to contact me if she needed anything, and she nodded before walking out. I know you all advised me to stay sober and keep a level head, but my world had just collapsed. I decided to take this week to sit on my back porch, drink, smoke cigars, and blast music. After this week, I'll stop feeling sorry for myself and get back to my usual routine. On a more positive note, I already packed up most of her things, clothes, jewelry, etc. I also threw in our wedding book and every photo that has her in it. If and when she comes back for her stuff, I don't want her here any longer than necessary. And before you ask, no, I didn't ruin her clothes or break anything except a few picture frames. As of right now, nothing else is happening. I've told everyone I needed to tell. My doctor's appointment is scheduled, my lawyer is hard at work on the divorce, and 90% of her belongings are in boxes. If she stays out of my way, this might be the smoothest divorce ever. Thanks for reading, and any advice is always appreciated. I'm sorry that she put me in this position where I had to inform people of what happened. It's really unfair. Infidelity doesn't just affect the relationship, but also impacts multiple mutual relationships. After all this, I've been indulging in my pity party with a lot of drinking. This is my first semi-sober moment since I found out about everything, and it's hard to put into words how I feel. I guess numb is the closest word. Previously, I mentioned notifying everyone. The only one who didn't respond was Gabby's sister, who I was very close to. That night, I continued my drinking binge and passed out on the back patio, surrounded by empty bottles and beer cans. I woke up to the smell of breakfast being cooked. My first thought was, oh Christ, Gabby came back and thinks breakfast will make up for what she's done. I worked myself into a rage, ready for a screaming match, but to my surprise, it was Gabby's sister, Wilma. I stood there for a moment, trying to calm down. When Wilma saw I was awake, she sprinted to me and wrapped her arms around me. She didn't say anything, just took my hand and led me to the table, placing a plate of food in front of me. As I ate, she apologized, explaining that when Gabby showed up at her house, she just said we were having problems and everything would be fine in a few days. When Wilma got my text about the divorce, she confronted Gabby, who broke down and told her everything. I scoffed, saying there was no way Gabby had told her everything, and I proceeded to fill her in on all the details. Wilma told me that Gabby claimed it was a one-time thing and that I was blowing it out of proportion. I told Wilma that I had no intention of getting back together with Gabby, and that if she was here for that reason, she was wasting her time. I asked Wilma to tell Gabby to find a lawyer. Wilma laughed and said she wasn't here for her sister, but for me. She explained that while she would be there for her sister, she and I were friends, and she wouldn't abandon me, especially since I hadn't done anything wrong. I stood up, walked over to her and hugged her. I'd been so worried that this mess would ruin our friendship, and hearing her say that made me feel so much better. Wilma stayed with me for 2 days, sleeping in the guest bedroom for you heathens out there. She left this morning as I was preparing to head to my cabin, a place I owned before the marriage, and that Gabby can't touch. As I was gathering my hunting and fishing gear, Wilma asked if she could join me. I told her that as much as I'd like that, she should probably go check in on her sister. She agreed, hugged me, and left. I'm truly grateful to Wilma for being there for me. Before any of you say she's into me, she's not. She's also 20, and that's way too young for me. It's just a really great friendship. I almost forgot to mention that I went to the doctor, got tested, and the results should be in on Monday. I've reached out to Henry's fiancée a few times just to check on her. She told me she's fine and doesn't know what to do. I told her if she wants to meet anytime next week to vent, I'm more than happy to listen. I'll be on here for a little bit, so if you have questions or advice, feel free to comment or message me. But I'll be leaving for the weekend. There's no internet out there, so I won't be around this weekend. I also want to say thank you all so much for reaching out, and all the praise. You've been a light in a truly dark time in my life. To anyone going through this, all I can say is to keep your head down and focus on what you really want. Whether it's divorce or reconciliation, set your goals one at a time. For me, it was lawyer first, then doctor, and notifying everyone close. Keep it off the internet and set aside time to get your feelings out. Thanks again, and sorry these updates are always so long. I told you about Wilma coming to my house and staying for a few days before I left to go hunting at my cabin. Good news, I got a buck, a nice 8-pointer, on my first day out there, which left me the rest of the time to go fishing. I caught 2 decent-sized fish, made one for dinner, and butchered the other. I spent my trip mostly sober, as promised, with just a drink or 2 a day. I found the solitude of the cabin therapeutic, giving me time to reflect on everything that had happened and clear my mind. The peacefulness of nature provided a stark contrast to the chaos of the past few weeks. In the last few days, I got a call from the doctor, and I'm all clean. It's not surprising since Gabby and I haven't been intimate in months, but it's still a relief. I reached out to Henry's fiancée but didn't hear back for some time. Eventually, she told me she's staying with her family right now, which likely means things aren't going well for her. At least she's safe and has the support she needs. She asked to meet for coffee the next day, and I agreed. We met at the same hipster coffee shop and talked for about 2 hours. The atmosphere there, with its quirky decor and eclectic music, felt oddly comforting despite the heavy conversation. We discussed everything that happened. She wanted to know if I was divorcing or considering reconciliation. I told her that after someone cheats, that's it for me. The amount of selfishness and disrespect it takes to cheat for a year showed me she didn't care about me. I asked about her plans, and she said she was confused, feeling like everything she thought was true turned out to be lies. She wasn't sure whether to move on or forgive him. I told her bluntly that just because her family wants her to forgive him doesn't mean she has to. Henry obviously doesn't value marriage, having cheated on her with my wife. I advised her to make decisions based on what she felt was right, not what others wanted. I shared that after I found out, my heart tried to trick my brain into finding a way to forgive her, but I just couldn't. I told her I only talked to one person, but my decision was already made, and no one could change my mind. We sat in that coffee shop for a while longer, just talking about life, trying to find some normalcy in the midst of the chaos. It felt good to share our experiences and realize we weren't alone in this mess. When you went to stay with your family, you probably had a clear idea of your next steps, but you let too many people give their input, which only confused you. I wrapped up by advising her to trust her gut instinct. Her brain and heart can deceive her, but her gut feeling is usually right. She thanked me, and we parted ways. The next day, I received a message from my lawyer confirming that Gabby had been served at her workplace. I thanked him for his efficiency and dedication. Not long after, Wilma called to tell me that Gabby hadn't left her room all day and was sobbing uncontrollably. I explained that she had been served and was likely coming to terms with her mistakes. Wilma asked about my time at the cabin, and I shared all the details of my trip. We chatted briefly and then hung up. Afterward, I started preparing myself for my wife's inevitable outburst. Given the timing, I expected her to explode soon. I had Advil ready, anticipating the headache that would follow her tantrum. I informed a friend of mine, and he agreed to come over if Gabby showed up, acting as a witness if things got out of hand. My friend advised me to get security cameras, contact lawyers, freeze your credit, move half your money where she can't access it, secure important documents, and take photos of everything if you think she might damage your property. But cameras have been up inside and outside the house since we moved in. My lawyer said there's not much I can do since it's also her house. I can't pull any money from our shared account until the divorce is finalized, but I'm not adding any more. It's shocking what kind of family encourages someone to stay with a fiancé who can't even stay faithful. After that, things went wild in a few days. I was on high alert, expecting Gabby to show up at the house in a rage. Given everything that had happened, I realized I never truly knew her. I checked all the cameras to ensure they were working properly, both inside and outside. I called my friend, warning him that Gabby had been served and asking him to come over if she showed up. I wasn't about to let her drag me into trouble. As it turns out, my instincts were right. Gabby arrived at the house, banging on the door and screaming to be let in. I immediately called my friend and Wilma, letting them know what was happening. Gabby was shouting and cursing, calling me every name under the sun and accusing me of being heartless. The whole time, I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. I wondered why she didn't just use her keys, assuming she still had them. When my friend arrived, Gabby was still in full meltdown mode. He started recording the scene from his truck. Unfortunately, he brought his wife, who was friends with Gabby. She tried to calm Gabby down, but Gabby slapped her, screaming for her to mind her own business. This prompted my friend to call the police. Gabby kept screaming until the cops arrived. When the police arrived, Gabby immediately tried to play the victim. One of the officers approached her, and she started crying, claiming that I had hit her and thrown her out of the house. My friend and his wife, who had seen the whole thing, told the other officer that Gabby was yelling and banging on the door when they arrived. Unfortunately, they couldn't confirm that I hadn't done what Gabby accused me of. After talking to my friend and his wife, the officer came to my door. Gabby pointed at me and said, "There, that's him. He hit me. I want him arrested." The officer started to put me in cuffs. I quickly told him that I could prove she was lying if I could just get my phone. The officer paused and allowed me to show him the footage from the outside cameras. After reviewing the video, he apologized for jumping to conclusions and assuming I was at fault. I told him I understood and didn't hold it against him. The officer then informed me that they had received 15 calls from my neighbors. Apparently, during her rant, Gabby had screamed out that I hit her, which prompted the calls. After dealing with the police for about half an hour, Gabby was put in cuffs and charged with disturbing the peace, public intoxication, and a driving under the influence. As they took her to the car, Wilma arrived and came to ask what had happened. I showed her the video on my phone. The officer then came up to me, handed me the case number, and some other paperwork. Wilma started asking questions about the charges, so I went back inside, and she followed. She explained that she had left her house for 10 minutes to run to the store. When she got back, Gabby was no longer in the living room, so she assumed Gabby had gone to bed after drinking too much wine. Wilma and I talked for a while, and she asked if she could stay the night. I told her she was welcome anytime. She informed me that Gabby would have to spend the night in jail and could be bailed out in the morning. Wilma said she called her parents to let them know what was happening and to see if they could bail Gabby out since she didn't have the money. We had a beer together and soon went to bed. When I woke up in the morning, Wilma had already left to meet her parents. I haven't heard from Gabby, Wilma, or their parents since, but I doubt their conversation was pleasant. Hopefully, Gabby cooled off in jail. It's been a little over a week since scandal with Gabby. I haven't heard from her since that night. But my lawyer was contacted by hers, indicating she now has representation, and we can finally start the divorce process. I also reached out to Henry's fiancée. We texted, and she told me she kicked him out of her house, and her father and brother packed up his things and dropped them at his place. They wanted to beat him up, but she asked them not to, wanting to move on. She thanked me for checking on her and said her close friends were supporting her. I sent her a link to my Reddit page so she could see the support from everyone. On Friday after work, I planned to head back to my cabin for the weekend. When I got home, Wilma was in my driveway. She wanted to grab her sister's things and had a list of what Gabby expected. I skimmed through it, noting that everything except one item was already packed or in the garage. I told her I wasn't going to transport or touch any of Gabby's stuff to avoid any accusations. I offered to pay for a moving company to handle it since I was heading to my cabin and didn't want to deal with Gabby's crap. She agreed and thanked me for the offer. I enjoyed myself as she took a box of Gabby's clothes and loaded it into her car. Then she turned to me and asked if she could come along this time. I said sure, suggesting she go home first to drop off the box and pack a bag. By the time I went to the store and loaded up the truck, she had returned. I locked up my house and headed to the cabin with Wilma. The weekend was wonderful. The last time I was there, I realized what a treasure the place is, offering a beautiful view and complete seclusion, so I don't have to deal with anyone. It's a place where you can truly relax and breathe. On Monday, I called a moving company, and by Tuesday, 3 guys in a big truck arrived and started loading. I recorded each box as they closed and picked it up and took pictures of all the furniture while it was being loaded. I thanked them for their patience and tipped each an extra $50. I then sent all the recordings and pictures to my lawyer and carried on with my day. The house feels empty, but also cleaner without her things. My lawyer advised me not to get rid of anything considered shared property, so I stored most of the furniture. I've been sleeping in the guest room since she left and have been buying new furniture, which I'll likely keep in the garage now that I have the space. I won't keep the house, even if I win in the divorce. It holds too many bad memories. It's been a while since then. I coach high school baseball, so between finalizing the divorce, dealing with my soon-to-be ex, and coaching, I have little free time. Quite a bit has happened. I didn't hear from Gabby until her lawyer contacted mine to inform him he'd be representing her. I reached out to Henry's fiancée and found out she had kicked him out, and her brother and father moved his things to Henry's new place. I planned to go to my cabin after work, but found Wilma waiting in my driveway, needing to pick up some things for her sister. After telling her I wouldn't touch any of her things, I offered to pay for a moving company the following week. Wilma asked if she could come to my cabin, and I agreed, mostly because everyone said she might need a break from her sister. I documented everything with the movers to prevent any false claims from her and sent everything to my lawyer. That's where my last post ended. A few days after the movers delivered her things to Gabby, my lawyer received paperwork claiming I damaged items and demanding $1,500, or she'd take me to court. My lawyer sent her all the videos and pictures, asking for specific evidence of damages. He told me this shows the judge how unhinged she is, which might be a headache now but will be great evidence in court. Her lawyer wasn't prepared for my meticulous documentation. When I discovered my wife's affair, I read horror stories on this page and vowed not to become one of those stories. I prepared for every possible outcome and accusation. Gabby called me every other day, but I never picked up. I forwarded her voicemails to my lawyer. He always tells me I'm a lawyer's dream client because I follow his advice and gather evidence independently. It reassures me that I'm handling everything correctly. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, my lawyer said we had enough evidence to settle out of court, which would look good for us if it failed. We set a meeting a week ago at a neutral lawyer's office. My lawyer advised me not to react to anything Gabby said because it would all be recorded for a judge. We arrived early, and to my surprise, Gabby was already there with her lawyer. We sat silently as the lawyers greeted each other. Gabby's lawyer asked what we had to offer. My lawyer scoffed and said, with all the evidence of infidelity and Gabby's inappropriate behavior, we would only offer her half of the house's sale price and half of the savings account, more than any judge would award her. He warned her that if she went to court, he would make her read every message aloud and describe every censored photo in detail. He also mentioned playing the video of her recent charges. Gabby started crying and asked me if there was any way to make things right. I told her she'd been cheating on me since before our wedding, and there was nothing she could do to make me forget or forgive her. I urged her to sign the papers, as it was more than she deserved, and I wanted to end this sham she created. She cried obnoxiously for 15 minutes before excusing herself to the restroom. When she returned, still in tears, she signed the papers and left. In about a month, everything will be finalized, and all I'll have left to do is sell the house. I want to thank you all for watching this video. I don't expect anything else to happen, but if it does, I'll let you know. I hope my experience has helped at least one person out there. Don't forget to leave a comment below. I really hope that by making such situations, such stories public, there will be much less of this in the future, and fewer people will have to go through what I went through. Goodbye, folks.